Thank you, Robert. Everyone, Robert Anderson. Let's give him a big hand. And I have actually known of Robert for many years, and I know that he and his beautiful wife do all they can, and I celebrate that tremendously. So from my heart to yours, Robert, thank you. Sacred service, y'all, welcome. We are right in the thick of it. We're in the middle of the month of our topic, sacred service. And what a juicy, juicy topic this has been. You know, we all started out at the beginning of the month focusing on sacred service to ourselves, knowing that we, just like the oxygen mask in the airplane, we really can't be of much use within our family and our community unless we're taking care of ourselves. And so we focused on taking care of ourselves, and I want to ask you something. How are those permission slips going? Good? Good? You guys still have them on your fridge? Are you still looking back at them every now and then? Are you still giving yourself permission to take care of yourself in a sacred manner? Yes, good. I love to hear that. And then last week we celebrated our Divine Feminine in honor of Mother's Day, and we moved into this idea of unconditional love. You know, that's a big part of sacred service, because when we can constantly move into unconditional love, which to me that just means that all of those conditions, all of those effects that are showing up in front of us that might not feel like love get to dissolve. Because when we move into that energy of unconditional love, everything is divine. Everything is fulfilling. Everything is beautiful, and everything feels wonderful. When we fill ourselves with that, we are then able to emanate that and experience it and express it in our family and our communities. And it's just a beautiful thing. And I know I talked about making things from scratch, and remember I talked about my grandma doing that? Well, guess what, y'all? She's here today. Yay, Grandma. So the missing family from last Sunday is here this Sunday in honor that there's no snow and it's supposed to be 80 degrees. So I just want to do a shout out to my mom, my dad, and my grandma, which is in the third row there. So happy that you're here. So very happy that you're here. So today we are moving into more of this idea of sacred service. You know, we're going to plant the seeds this morning of sacred service, and we're going to discover and figure out. You know, I know for a fact I'm preaching to the choir here, because I have been with many communities in my life and have served many communities in my life. And I'm not just telling you this as lip service or because you're sitting in front of me right now. This community has sacred service going on. I mean, you guys are unbelievably amazing when it comes to coming together, being in unconditional love, giving of your heart, of your time, of your essence. You guys really have this down. So I know that I'm definitely preaching to the choir, and I heard y'all singing earlier, so you're good, you pass. But I do want to mention something, and I'm bringing this into this morning because we're in the thick of it. We're in the middle of it right now, in the middle of May, and now we're going to explore. It's all about planting those seeds of service, and then what we reap, what we harvest from that. And believe it or not, it's not all outside of us. It's not all within the community. A great deal of what we harvest from our sacred service is within our souls. It's within our hearts, and it's within ourselves. Who knew, right? So we're gonna dive into that. First of all, I want to start out with this joke that I heard the other day. One Sunday morning, this pastor noticed little Alex staring up at this large plaque that hung in the foyer of the church. And the plaque was covered with names, and a small American flag was mounted on either side of it. And the 7-year-old had been staring at this plaque for some time. So the pastor walked up to him and stood beside him and said quietly, "Good morning, Alex." And Alex looks up at him, and he says, "Good morning, Pastor." And he's still focused on the plaque, though. His attention and energy goes right back to it. And so the pastor says, Alex says to the pastor, not even taking his eye off the plaque, he says, "Pastor, what is this?" And the pastor replies, "Well, son, it's a memorial to the men and women who have died in the service." And soberly, they stood there together, staring at the large plaque. And then little Alex's voice was barely audible when he asked, "Which service, Pastor? The 9 or the 11? Yes, 7 years old. So I know that was really funny, but I do bring that in because next weekend is Memorial Weekend. And I do want to say that as far as sacred service goes, we definitely stand in honor and gratitude for those men and women who have served sacred service to our country. So I do want to say that. So let me tell you a story about, it's a story about heaven and hell. And you know, we don't talk a lot here about heaven and hell, but this is kind of a parable. So in this case, it's kind of appropriate. Have you heard of the parable where the woman who had worked really hard her whole life to bring good to all was granted one wish before she passed on? And she said, "Before I die, I'd like to visit both heaven and hell." And she was whisked off to this great banquet hall immediately, and the tables were piled high of delicious food. It was beautiful. It smelled wonderful. And then she noticed that all of the people around these banquet tables were miserable. They were absolutely miserable, and they were starving, and they seemed wretched as they possibly could be. And she's like, "Why are they like this?" she asked the angel. And the angel said, "Look at their arms." And on their arms were attached long spoons. And they were not able to bend their elbows, so they couldn't feed themselves, and they were starving. And she said, "Oh, this is miserable indeed. This must be hell. Take me away from this." And she was immediately whisked off to heaven. You know, she was whisked off to the same exact situation. Tables, banquet tables filled with wonderful, delicious-looking food and great aromas, and people were smiling and happy and laughing, and they seemed well-fed and well-nourished. And she thought, what's the difference here? Does anybody know the difference? And the angel said, well, it's the same scenario. They all have the long wooden spoons attached to their arms, but they're feeding each other. You see? That's the nourishment and the nutrients and the love and the radiance of when we step into sacred service. We are fed. We are fed so much more than that which we're providing and giving our gifts of. You know, Webster's dictionary defines sacred as entitled to reverence and respect, highly valued and important. Now, if you were to put that with service, what does that bring up for you? Because what if we actually, and we talked about this in last Sunday's service, what if we actually moved into that space where everything was sacred service? You know, isn't it really all about being consciously aware of all that we do and all we show up and all that we are being? We are actually in service all the time. And to the degree that we're aware of it, to the degree that we can honor it and hold it reverent, is what gives it that tendency of feeling sacred. It gives it that tendency of radiating and shining, bringing about this feeling of fulfillment and beauty. You know, what a glorious way to relate to work and life, and giving reverence and respect for the divine in everyone, holding a high value of importance for all that is reflected in awareness and expressing it into life in everything that we do in regards to sacred service to ourselves, and then sacred service to all others outside of ourselves, because that's our community. This entire world is our community. Our family and our community here. Our relationship with everyone also reflects this expression of heart and becomes sacred as well. Were you aware of that? The relations that you have with everyone in your life, it reflects that. It kind of reflects where you are as far as holding it as reverent and holding it in conscious awareness. You know, we want to be with each other consciously, not in this idea of trying to fix them or that there's something in them that we want to change. You know, what if all we were looking at was entirely always a mirror of ourselves, and all we're here to do is unconditionally love ourselves and others? What if, huh? So we're not here to fix anybody. We're just here to be conscious with them in the moment, accepting what is. Most of the time, just listening and holding that space with them. To me, this is the highest expression of love. When we can just completely take in someone's presence and their energy and just love them for exactly where they are in the moment and exactly what they're doing in the moment. It's just really an incredible, wonderful, beautiful thing. George Bernard Shaw says, "I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community. As long as I live it, it is my privilege to do it whatever I can, to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a sort of splendid torch which I've got to hold up for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it to future generations." Yeah, that burns within me. Can you feel George's passion there in regards to life and showing up for life and not really letting a moment pass by when we're not in sacred service, when we're not consciously aware of what's alive within us and then that beautiful interchange that goes on between us and another person. You know, being in sacred service causes a lot of really good benefits to occur, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about. And I'm going to list some of the benefits, even though I'm sure you guys already know them. I mean, how many of you are familiar with all of the benefits that you have personally from being in service? Definitely. There's definitely some benefits to that. You know, you get to meet new friends and contacts. It increases your social and relational skills. You learn and develop a new skill sometimes, especially if you're stretching and growing and pushing yourself out there and getting out of your comfort zone. It increases self-confidence. It combats depression. It has what's called the happiness effect. Helping out others kindles happiness. Kindles happiness within yourself and the community that you're working with. Being a part of a community is a benefit. Motivation and a sense of achievement. It can boost your career options because you're learning all these skills and you're developing your leadership, and it just goes on. And it can increase new interests and hobbies and give you new experiences. You know, I can tell you what it did for me when I was really young, and I was 19. I was 19, 20 years old, and I had a brief stay in Florida and had moved back to Kentucky. Yes, it was for a love interest. We do amazing things for love, don't we? But here I was living in downtown Louisville, and I was in a new place, and I had never really lived in the city before, and all my friends lived pretty far away, almost too far away to see on a regular basis. And I was feeling pretty isolated. I was feeling pretty lonely. And I have another story to tell you about this, but I started working. I was hired on at an incredible position at the time for a Fortune 100 company in the finance department. And so I put all my all into my work, but I still wasn't feeling fulfilled at all. I was feeling pretty isolated. And they had this volunteer program there through work, and something within me just told me, you need to do this. You need to sign up. You got to put yourself out there. You know, you're going to shrivel up even more than what you're already doing. And so that's what I did. And they had, one of my huge loves in the world is horses. And they had this volunteer at Iroquois Park where you got to help and teach those with physical disabilities how to ride horses. And I thought, oh, that's right up my alley. So I started doing that, and it was just wonderful. And I met some of my greatest, longest lasting friendships from that experience that I ever had. And then the other thing I signed up for was teaching adults literacy. It was teaching adults how to read. Now just imagine a 19, 20-year-old going in and doing this, and you got some training from it, but I tell you what, the life lessons, the incredible, profound, knock you down on your knees and to the depths of your soul stories that I learned and experiences I learned in working with those adults changed me for good. They laid a really good, strong foundation for me. And it was blessings that were priceless for me. And those were my first experiences. Now, as a teenager, I kind of volunteered in the hospital where my mom worked, and I had a little bit of that going on. But, you know, back in my day, there wasn't a need for volunteer hours with teens. We didn't have to do that. So I think it's a wonderful program for people growing up because you get so much out of it. And so back to what George was saying, George Bernard Shaw, about holding that torch and about having that fire burn within you. You know, I've shared this poem with you before, and on the way here, you know, something just would not let go. It said, you've got to share this again, because this is all about planting the seeds of service. In our lives right here and today, and what's alive in us and what's alive in the world right now, this is a very profound poem that Donna Markova wrote. And she actually titled a book with the same title as this poem. And I know I've shared it with you before. I think it might have been one of my candidating talks. But this morning, it's calling out to be shared again. So I am going to invite you to open your hearts and open your minds and listen to this poem and allow it to wash over you and feel the depths and the profound message that Donna is writing about here. It's entitled, I Will Not Die an Unlived Life. I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allowing my living to open me, to make me less afraid, to make me more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance to live so that that which came to me as seed goes on as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit. That is a very powerful poem to me. It means a lot. And what it means to me is, you know, even before I physically came here to live and reside and be your senior minister in this community, I started planting seeds within this community. And I want you to know that, you know, every single week, life brings incredible sacred blessings, and this week wasn't alone. My heart was broken open this week through a few experiences where seeds that have been planted have definitely now produced fruit. And I was, you know, even when I think it's not even possible, I came into such a greater awareness of the divine love that we all are and how there is this perfect, incredible, unique pattern unfolding, and that it is truly all good, that the universe supports us in everything. Everything that we hold in our heart is true and that we desire, and that we are really here in sacred service to one another. And it's all about, you know I've mentioned before those stepping stones. It's all about if you step off of that stone, maybe because you didn't see it, it might have been foggy, you get off of your path, you know, we're connected. We're all connected, and we all come into these experiences to remind ourselves of that and to remember that. And when we come into that essence and that energy, and we can definitely do it most profoundly through sacred service, it just blows our life open again. It blew my heart open again. And I got to experience love and understanding in such a greater depth. It's just really beautiful. You know, that same job I was talking about how we plant seeds of service, and we sometimes never even know what fruit crops up from when we plant those seeds. And I'll tell you that after I had moved back to Louisville and I was going for that job interview that I told you about that I actually got, the job posting called for quite a bit of computer experience and knowledge, which I had, but it also called for experience in Windows. And this was in 1991, 1992, and Windows had just come out and wasn't really prevalent in schools yet or many businesses. And I had never worked on Windows, but by God, in that interview, I wanted to be able to say that I had experience in Windows because that's what they were looking for. So the night before, I opened up the Yellow Pages, and there was only one business that did computer services, believe it or not, back in that time. And I called them up, and this wonderful angel answered the phone, and this gentleman said, you know, whatever computer service it was. And I told him what I was all about, and he said, you know, I was getting ready to close up, but you come on down here. I've got it on my personal computer, which I just got in this week, and you're welcome to play around with it. So I drove down to his office. He sat me down at his chair, and he showed me around this thing called Windows, which blew my mind because I had always worked in DOS prior to that. And I was like, wow. And he showed me a little bit about how to maneuver it and do it. And I had pictures in my mind. And by God, when I went to that interview the next morning, I knew what I was talking about. Now, it was a spur of the moment, and I was young. And I, for many years, had wished that I had written that man's name down, because he was an angel and he planted a seed for me. He was of service. He was getting ready to close. It was his own personal computer. Could you imagine today a business? Well, yes, I can, because that's what we hold in consciousness. But I tell you what, he was an angel and he planted a seed of service within me that went on to really prosper and help me in my life. And I'm forever grateful to him for that. And I put a huge shout out to him. So see, being in service, a lot of times we don't even see the fruit of what it is that we plant, but it does definitely do really good. I know that it does good. I had asked, I'd asked Tony, my husband, I said, what does that mean for you when you're in sacred service? And I always love it when I have a talk title and I ask him, what that means to him. And it's just so beautiful, because he said the same thing that I was writing about and what other people I had talked to about it said. He said, well, to me it's about being aware in the moment and doing everything I can to pick somebody up. And in the store that he works in, he says he'll see a young mother with kids kind of having a hard time. So for all those, times that you were a young mother or a young father going to the grocery store, I imagine that could get pretty frustrating. And he'd see them having a hard time, so he'd start playing with the little kids, because he loves little kids. And he'll kind of grab their energy and do things to make them smile, just to help them out. Or if he sees a little kid giving the mom a hard time, he'll start saying, I bet you have the best mother in the whole wide world, don't you? I bet you really love your mom, don't you? And he said that usually they stare at him for a minute and they're like, yeah. But it's that shift of energy. A lot of times those seeds that we're planting is just shifting energy. Like Art beautifully shared in his reading, there is no big and small when it comes to being in sacred service, especially when we're doing it all the time in every area of our lives. Just shifting the energy and building somebody up, providing a smile, doing something that you can in that moment to help somebody out. That's selfless service. Siva is known as a definition of selfless service. And it's an important concept in a lot of Indian religions and yogic traditions and yoga. And it's because God is perceived as having a relationship with others as well as oneself, and serving other people is considered an essential devotional practice. It's a practice of indirectly serving God. And it's to where service to life is made easier for others because we're showing up in sacred service. It's a wonderful, beautiful thing. I'm sure you've heard this quote, truly offering or dedicating oneself, one's being, one's mind, heart, will, body, life, and actions to the divine, therefore making sacred of all of one's actions and deeds through consecrating and dedicating them to the service of God is what it's all about. Ramana, a gentleman by the name of Ramana says that. And that's what I'm here sharing with you this morning, where we're planting those seeds of sacred service. Conscious community is the sum of all of us who are choosing to teach this way that we live and what we come here to hear about every single week. It's a way of living ordinarily in the world, but not of the world. We like to live life practically, what is presently at hand from the clarity of our heart, rather than from the constantly changing states of body and mind and world, rather than getting pulled by the effects that are in front of you and the emotional tendencies, just like that beautiful song that Robert wrote from the parable, oh, this is good, oh, this is bad, oh, that's good, oh, that's bad. We can just be pulled over and over and over again in our lives if we keep looking at life from that effect. As you know, my favorite show, Northern Exposure, did a whole episode on external validation and how Ed had to fight external validation. We know that the whole idea of a conscious community and moving into sacred service is moving moving into this higher plane and moving into this place that's greater than that. And that's what we're talking about here. We realize that our purpose to be a dynamic, enlightened community, empowering the divine expression of love, that's our purpose here within this community. We recognize and realize that our purpose, that's what inspires us. That's what moves us to do all that we can do in this moment within our lives and within our community, within our greater community, within the world. And it contributes to the whole, and everybody wins. And if I'm ever feeling off my rocker, if I'm ever feeling off of my path, off of my stone, I love it. I go to that program. I've got a ton of them sitting on my desk. I go to that program and I read it. And it brings me right back to center. You know, what's going on for me right now? Let me go back to my purpose. Let me go back to my purpose. Catherine Graham says, to love what you do and feel that it matters, how could anything be more fun? How could anything be more fun? So sacred service, all about being fully present, being aware, showing up authentically, recognizing and realizing that there's no big or small to it at all. Rabindranath Tagore says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. We're asleep. We dream of what joy is. We come into our greater expression and authentic being of ourselves, and we act and operate that way, and we step into that. And then we discover the joy that we had dreamt about is truly a part of our lives. From Sacred Commerce, it says, serving the whole community is a path of awakening. It is seeing service as a way to transcend the domination of the small ego self. It's exactly what I'm talking about. And then we can talk about this in regards to sacred service. Consider most people find themselves in need some point in their lives. You know, it's not all one direction here. It's not all about you being in sacred service over and over and over again and that you're never in need and never in need of receiving some service yourself. It's a cycle and a circle. It's life. And that's how life operates. And sometimes you can be on both sides at the same time. You can be giving of service and then you can be receiving service. And being of service is also very healing. There's a story about a few years ago in a very small rural town in Oregon. A teenage boy died in a drowning accident. And in all likelihood, it says in the story that his death could have been prevented if an ambulance and trained medical personnel had been available. However, the small town was too poor to afford those kind of services. This is where being in sacred service becomes healing. Because the boy's mother grieved for the loss of her son, and she felt profound and deep pain. And from that profound and deep pain came a light within her heart that says, to be able to move through this, I need to do something here. What can I do? What can be done? She knew she could not regain her son, but she worked to prevent a similar tragedy. She trained and became an EMT. She completed her training and raised money and purchased an ambulance and trained other volunteers and basically created this volunteer EMT service in her town so that a tragedy like that would never have to happen again. And so she poured her essence of what she was brought to discover and learn and understand. She poured it right back into her community, knowing that to not have to go through the depths and the pain of that kind of loss, there was something she could do about it, and she did. There's also a little story about this older woman that there's this program called Reach to Recovery program that was founded in 1952 by Teresa Lassa, a breast cancer survivor. And like others before her, she had no one to turn to cope with her ordeal. The American Cancer Society adopted the program the same year that this woman telling the story had surgery in 1969, and she read about the program in the New York Post and asked her doctor, shouldn't I have one of these visitors? And the doctor said, what do you need them for? So she thought the feeling of being alone, she will never forget. She felt hopeless, alone, isolated, and knew that if she could transcend that energy, it would go a lot towards her healing. And so she guarantees anyone that volunteers will feel better emotionally, physically, and psychologically. She says, I don't care who you are or what you do. The people I know who volunteer have smiles on their faces. The hours they give are worth more than any money that they could ever receive. So are we having fun yet? Are we having fun? Because that's what they have discovered. Laughter is really the best medicine. Do you remember Patch Adams in his movie and what he did? And it was all around laughter and using humor. Now, he was a very smart man. He was brilliant and wise, but he also had a comical side to him and knew that there was a lot of power in the healing presence of laughter and humor. And so, and all this information that's out there on volunteerism will tell you that it's really all about having fun, too. You know, we're here to have fun. It says that you can incorporate work, or you can incorporate fun into whatever work is at hand for you to do, what is there for you to do. It says read a funny book together. If you're visiting someone that's medically, you know, getting a healing from something, it says bring humor into it. Bring a funny movie to watch. Bond with them. Rent a silly movie to watch with a homebound senior or a lonely child. It says it's a lot easier to bond during the time that you're giggling than if you're just kind of facing whatever situation is at hand. It's a lot easier to move through things when we're laughing. So Patch created this prescription, 10 everyday actions that I'm going to share with you. Patch Adams did. Number 1, pick up all the trash in an area in your hometown. Be its guardian and tell others about it. And I love that that's his number 1 on his top 10 prescription list, because when you turn, and I don't even, Coachman, when you're on Wolfensberger Road and you turn right, heading towards the sanctuary, and you turn right on Coachline Road, there's a sign, adopt this portion of this highway. And it hit me the other day because I travel that way all the time. I'm like, you know what? We could adopt that as a center. And then I saw Patch's number 1 prescription for everyday actions, and he says to pick up the trash in your area. So I'm getting a clear sign here. I think we need to decide to do that, form a group and decide to do that. He says, number 2, be friendly to everyone at all times and experiment outrageously. He was pretty outrageous, and I love to experiment outrageously as well. Offer a shoulder or a foot rub in any environment. Always speak up for justice, no matter how much it costs. Go once a week on a house call to a nursing home to cheer up people as a friend. Turn off your TV and become interesting. Perform yourself. Instead of watching those shows, make your own show. Make your life into a show and perform yourself. Consider being silly in public. Of course, if you're doing number 6, you're probably going to do number 7. Sing out loud and wear funny stuff. Find ways to need a lot less money and share beyond belief. Have potlucks frequently, which I believe we're instigating here at the center as we're having a potluck next Sunday. He says, have potlucks frequently, because everyone brings their little piece of the pie, and we all get to be nourished and eat from that big banquet of table, and to get to eat in all that delicious love and care and compassion and spirit of our community. Take your vacations in your own hometown and spend the money working on projects there to help build the community. I thought that was pretty cool. So embracing sacred service. You know, Thomas Edison said, I never did a day's work in my life. It was all fun. I love that. I love that. I want it to be all fun. So last week I said, I believe there is an inherent need and desire within all of us to be in service. It's an incredible feeling, and I'm sure that you've all been there. It's an incredible feeling when magically our talents and our skills and that which we have to offer and step into intersect in an area that needs it. And we just come alive, don't we? It's not just like turning on a light bulb. It's like turning on the skylight. It's like turning on the sunshine. Do you all know what I'm talking about? Yeah. When we're gliding along and we feel It's like this fulfilling thing. We feel so useful, and we feel like we are so much in service, and that we're honored, and that we're making a difference. And those that are receiving that, or what organization is receiving that, just grows and radiates and becomes built up and even more beautiful. It's a wonderful thing to enter into sacred service. So what happens when we plant those seeds of sacred service? I know I've kind of been talking about that, but what happens in your life when you know you've planted the seeds of sacred service? Can you imagine the unlimited ways in which our lives and the lives of those around us are impacted and changed for good? So I'm here to tell you, have we got something great for you? You can enjoy being a part of an organization that is making a difference, spend time with really nice people, feel good when you leave, and it doesn't even cost admission. Did that sound like an advertisement? So what we have going on right now in our community is we have what we call sacred service circles. And we're moving through this experience, this adventure of sacred service, the whole month of May, and we're culminating it on June 8th. And on June 8th, we're going to get together. The teens are going to do their final fundraiser for summer camp, and it's going to be a salad, soup, dessert, lunch. And then we're going to get together. Do you remember the Taste of Community that we did in December? Y'all that were here, remember that? We're going to do something similar to that, but guess what it's going to be like? It's going to be a volunteer speed matching, like volunteer speed dating. Have y'all ever heard of have you guys ever heard of speed dating? It's going to be volunteer speed matching. We're going to have little tables set up on all the different areas that we have and that we have as an outlet, an opportunity to provide sacred service within the community. And we're going to have information on all those different outlets, and the ones that you feel called to go to and find out more about, we're doing that. And and the whole part about speed dating is, I've never done it, but I think you sit in front of each person for a certain amount of time, and you kind of exchange energy enough to figure out whether there's something there to continue on or not. That's what we're going to do on June 8th. So some of our areas of sacred service involvement is the core council, the creation team. Did y'all know we have a creation team? It's actually meeting June the 22nd. And it's anybody that's interested. We get together and we vision and we pray and we create what the next few months, the month's themes and topics and what it is that we'd like to see and put on and provide here in the community. Who was at the drumming circle Friday night? We had our first ever drumming circle, and it was unbelievable. It was off the charts. We prayed, we drummed, we danced, we sang, and we were so excited when it was over. We went for like 2.5 hours and didn't even know we were doing it that long. And when it was all over, we were still so excited, we all went to Village Inn for pie. Yeah, so it is now known as Drumming Circle and Pie Night. But that's the kind of things that we want to provide, that kind of programming that allows us, in whatever way our hearts want to sing and dance and drum and pray and be together. And there's unlimited ways of doing that. And you guys have the answers. You guys have the inspiration. So we have a creation team that captures all that. We have marketing. That's really exciting. I'll tell you, marketing is a very exciting area to be in. You get to play with pictures. You get to play with colors. You get to play with how things go out. We have an events team or circle. We have our usher circle, our table angel circle, our audio visual circle. And I tell you, these guys are amazing. My gratitude and my heart opens up to them all the time. Those two guys right over there, Mark and Eric, they're awesome. We have the youth and we have the teens who are actually meeting across the hall right now. We have these programs going on, and they're wonderful, and they're rich, and they're alive. And if you don't know anything about them, come to the Speed Volunteer dating experience that we're having on June 8th and find out more about it. You know, I gotta tell you, I gotta share real quick about the whole marketing thing and do it church bulletins. You know, there's some really funny things that come out in church bulletins, and I'm going to share just a few of them with you. This was printed in one. Martha Belch, a missionary from Africa, will be speaking tonight at Calvary Memorial Church in Racine. Come tonight and hear Martha Belch all the way from Africa. Yeah. Miss Charlene Mason saying, "I will not pass this way again," giving obvious pleasure to the congregation. This is all stuff that's in church bulletins, y'all. Yeah, we definitely need a team to edit those church bulletins. The peacemaking meeting scheduled for today has been canceled due to a conflict. You gotta wonder about that peacemaking team, huh? The sermon this morning, Jesus walks on water. The sermon tonight, searching for Jesus. Yeah, they're going to be searching for Jesus. And to top it all off, going back to the joke I told at the beginning of the service, don't let worry kill you off. Let the church help. You can just ask little Alex about that. And so I know we're a little over on time. I didn't modify my sermon at all, but we went a little heavy on the front end. So I'm just going to invite you to go with me here, because I'm gonna close with a really great, it's not long, but a really great short video that kind of sums up what I've been covering this morning on planting the seeds of sacred service, and how sometimes we may never know until many years later where those seeds that we planted came about and benefited us greatly. Thank you so much. We'll pass without sharing it with joy. Wasn't that a beautiful short story? So we don't know the level and the depths of where our giving can affect people, but we certainly know the level and depths that our giving affects us. It impacts us greatly. It builds us within. It helps us to recognize and realize the divine expressing through us. And so here is our charge for this week. It's kind of like the first Sunday with the permission slip. I invite you in some way, in some shape, in some form, step outside of your comfort zone. Step into this area wherever your heart is calling for you to give, to either be of service or share a meal with someone or go to a nursing home or a home care provider and just read with some people. Do it as an experiment and see if that seed that we're planting, the seed that we're planting of sacred giving, watch it as it actually bears fruit within your own soul. Let's join together now, knowing that there is only one energy and power operating throughout our being, which is the divine energy and power of God. And it is through this energy that we gain insight, that we have ideas that truly, sharing it with the world, change the world for better. And it begins within each one of us. And so we are open and receptive to celebrating and rejoicing this incredible, nourishing fruit that starts to bear within our own soul and then goes forth and nourishes our community. I am grateful for this, and so it is.